What's the pettiest reason you won't date someone? Story 1. He was from Italy. We live in Eastern Canada. Completed the last 4-ish years of school together. We started talking a few years after we both graduated, and all he could talk about was his Italian heritage, but not like in an interesting way. More like I would ask him what's up, and he would say, "Making pasta, you know why?" And the answer is because he's Italian. But this would happen every single day. So he was just too Italian for me, I guess. Story 2. Oh God, my time to shine. I was dating this sweet, sweet boy, and he was like, "I do an amazing Beavis impression from Beavis and Butthead." And he was right, he did. He was so spot on that I realized he looked just like Beavis. Blonde, kind of squinted, a little overbite. After that, I was done. I felt guilty about it and told him it was my grandmother's fault. Edit. Since this has gotten a lot more traction than I thought, if you're about 50 years old and this sounds familiar, just know that I am very sorry. Story 3. This girl was beautiful, driven, intelligent. We got along well. She was perfect, except that she would snap her fingers whenever someone would say something she liked. Every conversation peppered with snaps. She'd do it instead of applauding at concerts too. Eventually, I realized that this couldn't be my life. Story 4. I haven't dated in 22 years. But after my mother's divorce, she once turned down a second date with a guy because he didn't order appetizers on their first date. Update. I feel a little guilty now, like I threw my mom under the bus. I don't think it had anything to do with money. She was raised in the 50s, and I think she was too shy traditional to ask for her own damn appetizers. But she felt like it would have been polite for him to offer. It's definitely petty and we make fun of her, and she laughs at herself about it now. But I see how it could make her sound like a princess. Story 5. Someone that takes forever to get ready to go literally anywhere. I once dated a girl and it literally took her 40 minutes to get ready to walk the dog for 15 minutes with me. Mind you, this was not a phobia. And for the record, she didn't wear any makeup, nor did she wear anything special that might explain the sloth pace. Just basically talking my ears off and spending an eternity tying her shoelaces. It even left me with a small existential crisis, wondering if I would even be cut out for children. But choosing a life like this with an adult, I have way too little patience for that, sorry. Story 6. Doesn't smell right. I don't mean lack of hygiene, just if I don't like their natural scent, it's not going to work long term. I'm not sure this is actually petty, though. Gets mad when driving. Adult emotional regulation is a must, and I don't want to be the spectator someone's temper. Story 7. Loud eating. One lip smack, and I'm out. I know I will never be able to deal with it. Same with snoring. Both of my parents snore like crazy. They sound like starting a mower. I'm not a violent person, but I've thrown a couple pillows out of sleep deprivation. One time I was so into a guy, and he clapped at the end of a movie, and I was definitely less attracted to him. I felt pressured to clap with him, and I was so embarrassed. Edit. Just remembered it was a Marvel movie as well. Edit 2. Adding guys who put pictures of their car in their dating profiles and people who don't put the shopping cart back or clothes back when shopping, or stay past closing time at restaurants or stores. Story 8. I went on a first date with a guy to a coffee shop. I got there before him and was sitting at a table waiting. He walked up, and instead of approaching and saying, "Excuse me, are you my name?" he very loudly yelled, "My name?" And everyone around turned and looked at him while I homered back into the bushes. It was over then and there. I think he thought he was being like manly and dominant or something, but I'm a private, introverted person, and that made my skin crawl. Story 9. Bad drivers crawling in the passing lane, oblivious to everyone passing on the right, and the dirty looks. Dude couldn't take his eyes off the road for a second without drifting into another lane. Sober, no second date. I don't think this qualifies as petty reasons, though. Story 10. Super into sports guys. The ones who can't sit on their behinds for more than 20 minutes and will eat a small chicken coop every week with rice and broccoli only. I'm not saying sports are bad, on the contrary actually, but being a health freak and always having too much energy is just not for me. Also guys who never lived alone, away from family. I want a man who can take care of himself and not just trade in mommy for a girlfriend who will continue taking care of him. Story 11. Had an ex that was 32 when we started dating 5 years ago. She'd only ever lived with family, never learned to drive, had no adult skills and talked like a baby. Didn't know all that before I let her move in. Getting her out took a very long time. So from now on out, I've got a checklist. Story 12. He talks a lot. I'm an introvert. He's not. He's good looking, amazing at his job, highly intelligent, and funny. He's also a prankster who loves to play pranks on me. It can get annoying, but I enjoy his childlike enthusiasm. He's also an all-around good guy. He loves to take care of the people he cares a lot about. For the most part, he's a great conversationalist. However, when he starts talking, there is no off button. Story 13. Someone who is emotionally affected by social medias. If you're jealous of your friends having a good time without you, Or seeing other people do cool things gives you FOMO instead of inspiring you to do better. You have a terrible mindset, and your bull mentality will bleed into every aspect of their life. Story 14. I went on a first date with a girl. She was very attractive, funny, and we had a lot of laughs and great conversation over dinner. I was driving her back to her place, and she started singing along with the radio. She was so tone deaf that it was like listening to fingernails on a chalkboard. I never asked for a second date. Story 15. The pettiest reason I rejected someone was over what our dinner talk was. He spent an hour of our dinner lecturing me the extensive history and etiquette of worldwide silverware. If that's your interest, pop off. However, if you spend our dinner talking about a 3-pronged dessert fruit fork from China and refuse to let me get a word in edgewise, yeah, no can do. Story 16. I lost interest in a guy I had been talking to for a while when he broke down his post-wake-up, pre-breakfast AM supplement routine for me, and it involved measuring out TSPs of pink Himalayan sea salt and making bulletproof coffee. This was way back in 2013, along with a bunch of other foolishness that was later debunked. His whole routine was so specific that I said, well, guess you aren't sleeping here, and just let nature take its course. That, and he was very strict about being gluten-free even though he didn't have celiac disease. So, no insomnia. Now, doing bumps with our boss, totes fine, perfectly okay, but no gluten. Story 17. If they showed any interest in me while they're dating someone else, when I can just tell like me a bit more than a friend, had someone I once was lightly flirting with until I found out she had a girlfriend she never ever mentioned. I obviously was super platonic after I found out. Eventually they broke up and she seemed even more interested in talking to me. Avoided her very harshly. If you showed any interest in me while in a relationship, I won't ever want you again, no matter what. Story 18. Currently married, so I don't date anyone. But if I wasn't married, my answer is, has an identical twin. My wife is a twin. Twins are inseparable, and they will always put the other one first. At best, you are competing for second place in their life. If their twin decides to move across the country, they will follow them without any consideration for the well-being and happiness of you, your family, etc. They will uproot the life of you and any kids you have together. They will make excuses like, it's best for us and I'm doing this for the family, but really, it is all about their twin. Story 19. I always refused to date another ginger because I didn't want to end up being one of those weird ginger families. I also promised myself I would never date someone named Abby because I knew an Abby when I was a kid that I absolutely couldn't stand. One day a few years ago, I met a beautiful ginger girl that straight up had me swooning. We had great chemistry right off the bat, too. But of course her name was Abby. I about broke both of my rules for her, but she was dating someone else and still is to this day. I've stayed true to my petty promise and am marrying a blonde whose name is not Abby. Story 20. Back when I was single, I started talking to a guy on Tinder. He was extremely attractive, clever, funny, and we had so much in common. Immediate click. However, he made podcasts. They were always an hour long at least, and they were the most boring, dry, painful things to listen to. He'd churn out one every couple days and always expected me to listen to them immediately and then wanted to talk about them for hours. After a couple weeks of this, I bailed. I absolutely could not spend the foreseeable future spending hours a day on these podcasts. After that, I found myself immediately turned off anytime a guy told me he had a podcast. Story 21. I did date this person, but I had a boyfriend a long time ago that I had met online. This was even before dating sites, I think. We had met on a general topic message board. When we first finally met in person, I remember my heart sank a little bit when I realized he was wearing very old, faded, worn-out shoes. I put effort in how I looked for him, and he couldn't even put on a halfway decent pair of shoes. I'm not even talking about name brands or anything. Just some that didn't look 20 years old would have been nice. Story 22. Music's movie taste is my one deal breaker. I mean, I have been married now 14 years and really lucky we have very similar taste on almost everything. But back when I was out dating, if her music or movie taste did not align, I just couldn't. Would have nothing to enjoy together. Story 23. She had a very weird smell. It was very musky, heavy, animalistic smell. It always made me think of sweaty animals. The strange thing was that I was the only one who could smell it. I suspect she also could smell it because she would visibly get offended every time I brought it up, but no one else could. And I asked around. This was strangest relationship thing ever. Anyway, didn't work out and broke up a week after becoming official. Story 24. I like a guy with good hair. So bald or receding hairlines are a no-go for me. Also, a few months ago, I went on a date with a good-looking guy. He was tall and in shape, but he had bad teeth, like discolored and even a bit blackish near the gum line. Sorry, but I was not going to kiss him. It was a turn-off. Bad breath and BO or other no's for me. I'm also turned off by guys too into their dogs. I prefer a cat daddy. If they have photos of their dog licking their face on their dating profile, I'm grossed out. Story 25. This was a couple years ago, but was in a talking stage with a girl I thought was super interesting and pretty and was about to ask her out to meet. Through internet sleuthing, I found she had a TikTok page of her ranting about dating and doing dances, and as the girls say, I got the ick. I couldn't do it and changed my mind. Story 26. Guess not that petty, but in high school I took a girl to grab Chick-fil-A and see a movie. Eat in the car situation as I drive. She took the trash and threw it out the window on the highway before getting to the movie. I asked why she did that, and she said it didn't matter. We watched the movie, I took her home and said no thanks. Story 27. I took a girl to a bar I had a good reputation at. I get free drinks from bartenders so I could try and experience new things, while they knew I'd tip them the cost of a good cocktail. She was lovely. It was fun talking to her, and then she went to tip and I saw her check. She rounded up to the nearest whole dollar, then bragged about it. I tipped extra, then ghosted her immediately after. Story 28. I had 3 that ended my last relationship. She couldn't swim. We went on a Florida beach vacation. I spent hours swimming with the kids, but she never got in the water once other than wading. I love to kayak and paddleboard. I don't want to constantly be on alert for my partner who can't stay afloat. She was much too picky of an eater. I love Asian food. She liked rice, Taco Bell. I love to cook and made her vomit several times from the smell. One was a steak with garlic, salt, and pepper. The second was tandoori chicken. Lastly, allergic to my cats. She said she was going to be good at the beginning of the relationship, but it was quickly evident that she was not. My cats ended up locked in the garage 6 of the months we lived together. She was a wonderful, accomplished, beautiful woman I respect to this day. Unfortunately, I felt so disconnected from who I am that I just couldn't convince my heart to do the thing. Story 29. Phone use. If she talks loudly on the phone, say we're watching TV at home, and she takes a phone call and has a loud conversation on the couch next to me, drowning out the TV for a chit-chat talk, or talks on speakerphone with it in front of her in public, or if we go out to dinner or for drinks, and she spends even a third of the time on her phone texting or scrolling. Also, if every single outing or dinner needs to be a photo opportunity or social media post, I honestly think this one's the biggest for me. My wife doesn't even take pictures most of the time and instead asks me to do it because I take better photos, and I love that. A quick photo or two and let's actually enjoy the thing we're doing. Story 30. This guy I knew a few years ago checked all my boxes except he had this very annoying way of eating. It just IDK, but firstly it felt like I could hear him chew, swallow, bite everything, like I just could hear it all. And then the way he would eat really slowly, one bite at a time, daydreaming for a few minutes, then again, another bite. Every time we sat for a meal, I felt like I was going to explode. Story 31. I still don't know if this was petty. The jury is still out, but I ended it because she was too involved and attached to her family. I'm a family man. I love my family, call my mom every day, make sure I spend time with my sisters now and then, hang out with my dad. No problem. But this girl couldn't do anything without including her entire family. Every day, we would have to make plans with them. Even just a movie at home would involve her sisters and mom. I'd wake up to her talking to them, video call, in bed every morning, say hi to mom. The only time we weren't with her family was when we visited mine. Then one day, she suggested our families meet each other. This was the end. Once that happened, I knew even my family time would be hijacked by her family. They were nice people. Just too much. Story 32. I would unmatch with ghost people if they heavily enjoyed certain adult cartoons. A guy I used date, and I were already on the verge of breaking up. What killed all my remaining feelings and finally helped me grow a backbone? He sent me a photo of him wearing Family Guy pajama pants. I couldn't do it anymore. He was a nice enough guy, and I wish him the best. He just had a big lying problem and didn't like me as much as he thought he did. Story 33. Snoring or even loud breathing when they sleep. I have an extremely difficult time getting to sleep at night, and am incredibly sensitive to the sound of snoring thanks to my dad who used to rattle the windows with his snores. It's so bad that if I'm in a hotel and can faintly hear someone in a nearby room, I won't be able to sleep that night. Imagine how bad it is for me trying to share a bed with someone who snores. It's an immediate deal breaker. Story 34. Wrong bone structure. In the face, not the waist. LOL, scientists say you like similar faces to your own, and I love me a man with a square face and have yet to find others attractive. That alone narrows my list, plus they must have black hair and dark eyes and a short beard. I wish I was Hall from Shallow Hal, BC. I'd have way more dudes to choose from. Unfortunately, you don't get choose what you're attracted to. Story 35. I don't know if this counts as a petty reason, but I really don't like people who can't be straightforward. There was this guy one time who was clearly interested and acting like he was already officially my boyfriend, but whenever I asked about his intentions, he tiptoed around the topic. He made me feel like I was being too full of myself when all I wanted to know was whether he was interested or not, so that I can also figure out how to react to things he did or said. I wasn't ready to be in a relationship at the time. And yet, even though he made me feel for simply wanting to know what he was up to, he would always act jealous and irrational, always being so clingy and constantly asking for updates and whatnot. It was annoying, and I just realized then that I don't like mind games like that, even at a microscopic level. Story 36, he was great, but he had a mole on his eyelid that would pop out and surprise you. There were other things, like refusing to talk about his previous engagement, always talking about banana bags with the guys, said he slept with over 60 people, ignoring me a ton, then expecting immediately when he came back. I told him I cheated to make him leave. I didn't, and he left and never came back. Story 37, respect for movie theater etiquette. I went on a date with a girl I hooked up with one night back in college. It was nice, but it wasn't serious. A year later, we still had some mutual friends. I was living in the city, and she somehow got my pager hash and called me out of the blue. I thought, sure, let's hang out. Why not? I got us tickets to see The Sixth Sense. It was the must-see thriller of the year. The theater was jam-packed. She left her seat twice during the movie. The first time was to use the restroom. It was right after the last preview, too. We were sitting in the last row on the first floor, and she climbed over her seat behind us to exit the aisle. There was a group of tough-looking Asian kids sitting next to us who were extremely patient. She came back 10 minutes into the start of the movie with snacks that she bought just for herself. She handed them to me so she could climb back over into her seat. She brought back a giant Coke slushie, a box of gummy worms, and a tray of stacked nachos. I have no idea why, in hell, someone thought it would be a good idea to sell nachos at the movies. Marketing. Trust me, bro. It'll be great. Have you ever sat next to someone in a dark theater who's eating nachos? You can smell the orange cheese and jalapenos from 3 rows away. Plus, they're loud as hell when you eat them. I have no doubt that all anyone around us could hear was the sound of crunch, crunchity crunch, slurp, crunch, crunch. Then, about 15 minutes before the ending, she said she had to run to use the restroom. This time, everyone in the aisle had to make way for her. She came back just before the most cliffhanging scene in M. Night Shyamalan movie scene history. No spoilers. The entire theater gasped and was completely silent, except for my date asking me a question out loud. What just happened? I don't get it. Me whispering, I'll tell you later. When we left the theater, I felt the sniveling steers of humanity as the audience walked by us. When we got outside, a bunch of sport cars almost ran us over as they zipped right by. I swear it was those kids. Story 38. A dude I'd started seeing was sitting in my room once and was looking around. He turned to me and said, "Whoa, you must really love stars." I looked at him confused, looked around my room for the better part of a minute. Then my eyes settled on literally the only thing in my room with stars on it, a robe hanging on the door. That was enough for me to end things. Oh well, when I think about it now, maybe 10 years later, I realize I just wasn't that into him. Story 39. It was laundry day for him. We met up at a coffee shop at his suggestion. I thought he just got off work since he appeared to be wearing a company shirt. Nope, it was a polo shirt from a job he no longer worked at. It was laundry day. I also had to drive 35 minutes to meet him in his area, and there was no offer by said date to comp my $5 tea. This was a decade ago. Tea was cheaper back then. Story 40. I will not date a man who shaves his pubic body hair. Not only is it rarely done properly, but the prickling when it grows back is horrid. I also just find bare crotches to be generally unattractive. I don't mind trimming or removing hair that grows in awkward places, but the bare thing never made sense to me. If I wanted a less hairy partner, I would seek out a woman. A man can hit all the marks, and I'll just move on to a new prospect if I don't find hair down south. Story 41. A guy once messaged me on Occupid, and he kind of didn't look too bad and seemed like he might be a nice person to chat with, but his profile said he wrote South Park fan fiction, and I was like, ew. I'm not against the writing fanfic thing. I'm kind of into it, actually. I love a guy who is creative. But something about South Park fic, I was like, yeah, no, not going to even reply. Story 42. Eating habits, picky eaters, unwillingness to try new foods. I understand there's going to be people that don't like this, don't like that. But those people that know they don't like something but want to go somewhere because they saw it on social media or because they hear it's popular, knowing they don't like what that place is known for. There's other examples, but that specific example comes to mind currently. Really grinds my gears. Story 43. I'm not saying I have broken up with someone over this yet, but I 100% would. if you lack spatial awareness, and the people around you keep having to change directions or make detours because you're about to bump into them, and you don't even realize it. I actually have stopped hanging out with people after seeing a pattern of them failing to realize there are people around them. Why'd you drop back so that we're walking in a line? Because that lady that just passed us was in fact trying to pass, so I gave her more space. What lady? The one who is now walking in front of us. I didn't notice her passing us. Clearly. Story 44, not having their license. I don't live in a city, so you can't ride a bike from A to B. It's car or public transport, and public transport is not amazing. But more importantly, it doesn't go to my house, outside of Uber or a taxi, but that's pricey. I've dated people without their license, and it drives me nuts. I end up having to spend a lot of time driving us both to different places. It's really tiring, and gets worse the further away they live. I understand not everyone can drive. Some people have disabilities that make that difficult, or some people haven't gotten the chance due to happening in their lives. In some cases, I'll make exceptions, but for the most part, I just can't do it. We need to both be able to drive without me worrying about them being late due to public transport, or their ride getting canceled, or just plain them being safe. Story 45. I found that women my age, 28 or younger, are largely terrible about holding the door open for people and other expected mannerisms, and I refuse to date anyone who doesn't have those manners. Being oblivious to your surrounded and/or careless of those around you is a major turnoff. I'd see how hot you are if I'm behind you and the door slams in my face. I no longer find you attractive. Story 46. Too positive. Toxic positivity, I guess. Dated someone whose entire personality was the nice, friendly to everyone. There's always a positive side to everything type, and it literally felt like you couldn't even be aggravated at life, work, anything, or you were wrong for not being positive. After we split, I found out that literally everyone around them couldn't stand it either. Story 47. If they're not willing to share many things about themselves with me, I understand stuff about other people can be kept confidential, but I just feel like I'm being kept in the dark if they're not willing to talk about their lives or themselves. For me, relationships where many secrets are kept will keep me up at night, speaking from experience. Story 48. He seemed nice and he was cute when we met for coffee, but near the end of the date, he told me he was moving to upstate New York for the next year or so for work. I live in Wisconsin. I was hoping for someone close enough to see on weekends, and also the fact that we'd been texting for a few days, and then all night before that, and he didn't tell me and told me he was local kind of felt weird. Story 49, eyebrows. I once passed on a very nice woman because she had Sasquatch eyebrows. No plucking, trimming at all. We'll also pass on the recently fashionable black rectangle eyebrows. Just a severe black rectangle. Looks like it was drawn on with marker. Speaking of markers, drawn-on ones are also a turn-off. I can say all this because I'm perfect in every way and wealthy too. Story 50, smell. I don't know why, but I am smell dependent. I adore the way my husband smells. I cannot get enough even though we've been married over 30 years. Back when I was single, nothing much mattered if I did not like the guy's smell. It has nothing to do with cologne, or anything beyond good hygiene. Just the bare smell. I have seen some general studies of smell reactions, and for me it's so true. Works somewhat on female friends, but it's not as strict. Story 51 takes too long to reply. I'm saying it's an everyday thing, like 4 or 5+ hours every day to reply. I don't think you're that busy. Like if I scroll on our conversation that day and it's barely a memo long, I'm out. Or it takes all day to discuss a topic. One topic should take like 10 minds, not an all-day thing. I'm tired of waiting for a reply so we can finish talking about this topic. Story 52. I couldn't date someone if they were a picky eater. Now, everyone can have preferences, and obviously they don't have to like everything, but the idea of dating someone who only eats like pizza and chicken tenders would drive me up a wall. I like to cook as well as try new restaurants. I love food. I'm also a big food tourist. When I travel, trying the local cuisine is a big attraction for me. Dating someone who is just as enthusiastic and passionate about food is really important to me and not something I would compromise on. Story 53. So there were multiple reasons I didn't like this girl, but the main thing that really drove it home was that, as a career, she managed parking lots and seemed completely content with that. Just seemed like the absolute most stupid job I'd ever heard, and I couldn't deal with that over all the rest of her beige qualities. Story 54. When I was a teenager, I met a girl. We hit it off. We talked about dating, but it turned out she lived in a different public transit zone, so I never saw her again other than chatting online. For added context, it'd be like if the bus costs $2 one way until you cross a single bridge, then to get back it costs $3. This wouldn't sound too bad unless you're a jobless student with a bus pass, and said bus pass only covers one zone, and upgrading to both zones adds an additional $50 a month. Story 55. She was cute and had a pretty decent date. She never even reached or acted like reaching the wallet while paying the bill at multiple places in a date. Of course, I would like to pay and definitely not going to let my date for the first date, but I just really hate when the person just stares at me expecting me to pay when the check arrives. Story 56. They ask me out to drinks knowing I don't drink or do things like that. I've had a few instances where people know I'm not interested in a certain activity and they ask me to do that exact thing they know I don't do. It makes me angry. But I gave them the opportunity to plan another activity with me, and they just didn't. I guess they thought no to the activity meant no in general, despite me saying we can do something else. No to an activity they should have known I'd say no to. Story 57. I got to the point of going on a date with a guy I'd been texting for a while on the apps. He said he'd been working in the UK for the past decade or so, and when we finally met up, he said hello in a strong Australian accent. Turns out he grew up in Australia. I thought I could get used to it, but when things got hot and heavy later and I heard "or year bye," I ghosted him. Story 58. I won't date two girls with the same first name. This applies to the name they go by, BTW, not their actual birth name. So even though this one cute girl that I was getting close with was Catherine, she went by Katie, so she was still a no-go because I previously dated a Caitlin, Katie. I'm not superstitious or anything. I don't believe anything bad will happen if I were to date two girls with the same name. I just won't do it. For no real reason. You asked for petty. Story 59. Most people won't consider this petty, but if I don't find them physically attractive, you can be the best person in the world for me, but if you're not there physically, I can't do it. Mind you, I'm not exactly a 10 myself and by no means have high standards, but it's just something I find very hard. I am not much of a physical person. I am spiritual and find emotion profound, so for me not dating someone solely because of appearance is indeed petty. Story 60. I once really liked a guy who was cute and nerdy. He liked me too. We had just started working after graduation. One day I was feeling mushy and I asked him to stay back 10 extra mins than our usual time do, that we could continue talking. He said, I can't. What would I say to my elder brother when he asked why I am 10 mins late? Just the idea that a working professional, a supposed adult, could not stay 10 mins extra for no reason other than, what would I tell my brother, turned me off completely. I don't know why, but I actually felt relieved that I no longer have to navigate through complex layers of dating him, and I said okay bye with bright smile. Story 61. I can't stand beards other than the very short or just like light scruff kinds. A dude could be a model and amazing and I would have zero attraction. I need to see your face, dude. Also, weird stuff gets stuck in it. They look like grandpas to me. I just think they look awful and make the guy seem vain, like he's obsessed with being macho or something. IDK. I know it's shallow, but I don't like some big grizzly fuzzy thing hiding your face and mouth. Man buns too. Ugh! So weird how that became a thing. Story 62. Someone I dated suddenly started smacking their lips all the time and it drove me nearly insane. Also, their lips made sticky noises too. I would get a surge of rage through my body as I calmly said nothing but cringed physically. I think they needed to drink more water as we were living at high altitude, but they didn't even notice it. Fortunately, I settled in and married a loud cabinet closer instead. Say I have a migraine and walk in the kitchen, no awareness at all. Slam. She doesn't even hear it. She cannot let it go closer than halfway. I have tried to coach her up, but now I just hustle to another room or to the bathroom when she's making food. I even had a contest once to see if she could be a jewelry thief and steal one of our plates. She is currently doing life with me as her punishment. If that's the worst thing, I figure I'm doing okay. Story 63. If they're a picky eater. I love to cook and eat out, and I can't sit at a table across from you and have you ask for a burger and then ask to take things off of it like a child. If you really don't like it, just ask for the burger and take the tomato out yourself at the table. IDK, I've always gotten secondhand embarrassment from people I go out with asking that. Story 64. I remember a guy on here talking about dating a very well-known influencer. He couldn't give her name out, but said that once you realize she has to document her daily life, it gets old really fast. Everything from what she was eating to what she was wearing. I think he said they lasted a month. Story 65. His feet smelled. I couldn't get over it. I tried to remedy it by getting him to shower with me, but he just wouldn't really focus on washing up, which I guess is fair. Why would that be your focus? But I couldn't stand the smell. It made me realize that I didn't really like him that much because I chose to end it instead of just telling him I wanted him to wash his feet. Story 66. He was a little weird, but rather nice overall. There were other bigger things, but one of the pettier reasons for not continuing to date this guy was that he would just brag about how much money he spent on what. He'd just gone on a short trip with his dad and siblings to somewhere nice, and he wouldn't stop telling everyone about the drinks he got and for how much. He did that with everything. Story 67. I came very close to not dating my husband because his name is Mike. I'd had very bad luck with Mikes in the past, 6 times actually. And before my husband, I'd turned down a few Mikes just due to their name. Glad I broke my own rule. Hubs is lucky #7. Been married 16 years now. Still don't know why I was a Mike magnet though. I certainly wasn't seeking them out. Story 68. He said our language equivalent of literally and kept changing his storyline. I'm literally a chef. He dropped out after 4 months. I literally own a house. His parents were rich and bought it for him and did not even pay rent. If I touched anything, I just kind of liked he bought it. After I left him, I gave away 6 bags of things. Everything for children's stuff to adult things. Oh, and he was a CIS guy that I was not into. Story 69. I recently dated this cute girl. She was really sweet, always caring, and also kind of pretty. But I stopped dating her after a few dates. 2 different petty reasons. 1. When I first came over, after she invited me obviously, her room was a total mess. Like totally. I couldn't walk normally through her room, and the room of a person shows what they look like on the inside. 2. She always wanted to buy me something and also spend all of her own money on makeup, etc. herself. That's a sweet gesture, but offering me a €300 concert ticket if you only have €200 is not very financially responsible. And TBH, if I am in a relationship, I want my partner to be financially responsible. I didn't take the offer, OFC. It was sad that it didn't work out, but I don't regret it. Story 70. Worked with this really gorgeous redhead when I was 20. Both me and my friend worked with her in the same department. She wouldn't date my friend because he was nerdy. I was much nerdier than he was. I just couldn't afford the cool t-shirts and other swag because I was helping to support my baby sister. So when she asked me out, I kind of pissed her off by saying no and laughing because I thought it was funny. I was honest though. I told her that after weeks of her giving me excuses of why she couldn't date friend because of insert nerdy reason here, that she'd be very disappointed to find out I was significantly nerdier. Story 71. I was 16 and had a couple dates with a guy I met in a summer camp, couple summers ago camp, and kept in touch with. He was intelligent, now a Harvard postgraduate, kind, cute, and we shared a lot of interests in common. We planned to meet up one day and he showed up with the fuggliest leather frock coat I have ever seen. A copperish tan, very long, tight at the top, flared at the bottom leather coat that still haunts me today in my dreams. Guy is now super successful and rich and probably still very kind, but I will never regret walking away from that fugly coat. Story 72. She dropped things. Not intentional, just forgot to hold on. Smartest girl I've met, nearly 4.0 GPA. Great looker and sense of humor. Dated her for 3 years, but regularly she'd be holding something. Get distracted and just let go. Be it a plate, a book, her phone. I couldn't help thinking, what if we ended up having children and she drops them? Ended up breaking it off. Story 73. I was friends with a girl in high school. She was pretty, friendly, and lived in my neighborhood. Looking back at things, she must have liked me, invited me over to her house quite a bit. Sometimes it would be just us two. She wanted to be a veterinarian. The deal breaker was that she was basically an animal lover to the extreme. Their family had a small detached party room and it smelled like cat pee so bad. I knew we couldn't be in a relationship because I just don't want to have pets. Story 74. I wouldn't date a man who didn't have a friend group of honorable guys. Likes attract. So if he had friends, he was either an as well or, even worse, a weak, needy enabler. And a guy with no friends was a big red flag. If his own kind saw that there was something wrong with him, I didn't need to get involved. If he couldn't already maintain long-term friendships, he wouldn't have the skill set to be my long-term best friend, and I wasn't interested in a project. Story 75. I was talking to this guy, very sweet and charming, but he would always randomly put on a Jamaican accent in the middle of our conversation. He wasn't Jamaican. Same guy? We would be in the middle of a serious conversation, and he would randomly start dropping some questionable bars about whatever we were discussing, and then finish it with "ow" bars by his name. He was dead serious, and this would happen at least once every time we spoke. He would always wait for my response, and I would stare at him, dead silent, pat his shoulder and tell him I was worried about him. Sometimes I'd hush him in the middle of his freestyle and tell him that it was okay and that he didn't have to do this. And he also had the same name as my dad. Story 76. I told a dude I was dating, after we finally met, after knowing each other for years, that I found another person to be with because I watched him struggle eating a hamburger. He had swallowing and digestion issue, but I didn't know they were that bad. I don't want to see the person I'm with struggle to eat food, so I let him think I was cheating on him and found someone better, rather than him know I broke up with him over something he can't control. Story 77. I met him online. He was funny, romantic, smart, and sweet. Not my usual physical type, but not a deal breaker. Quality friend material, but we were both interested in more. Then I met him in person for the first time, and His breathing. He was just perpetually out of breath. Heavy breathing like he'd just run up several flights of stairs. Wet mouth noises in between the gasps didn't help, but that breathing was something else. Story 78. Certain women have this weird metallic smell about them when I stand very close. The women who have the smell have it all the time, freshly showered or not. Whatever they're wearing, day in, day out, year-round. It doesn't matter. It seems to emanate from the pores of their skin and it never goes away. I find the smell to be distressingly unpleasant. Luckily, I only notice it strongly when I'm right next to them. It's reduced to a manageable level at normal conversational distances. No other smell affects me in this way, and I have no idea what causes it or whether anyone else can smell it. I can be friends with someone who has the smell, but I could never be intimate with them no matter how compatible we were in every other way. Story 79. I've been married for years, but back when I was online dating, a huge amount of ladies' profiles stated the phrase, live, laugh, love, which was my kryptonite. I found it really weird and creepy when practically everyone in unison thinks some cheap and trendy at the time slogan is super meaningful. It creeps me out. Feels like they can't think for themselves. Story 80. I would never date anyone with my ex-husband's first name, never even allowed a conversation to start. The very thought of being with someone with that name made my skin crawl. Actually, I had a friend married to a man named Michael, and their son was Michael. They separated, and she met a man named Michael, who also had a son named Michael. They ended up marrying and then divorcing, which anyone who knew her saw coming. She knew about my refusal to deal with men with the same name as my ex, and after most of the dust had settled, told me she would never, ever get involved with another Michael.